I am happy to learn that the Crescent University is going to set up a center for training students who want to appear in various competitive examinations. As you know, the competitive tests are held by various organizations. For example, UPSC holds an All India competitive test for recruiting officers for Indian Administrative Service, Indian Foreign Service, Indian Forest Service, and for various central services. Similarly, state public service commissions hold competitive tests for recruiting officers for state civil services. Banking recruitment boards also hold various tests for recruiting both probationary officers as well as for other grades of employees in the banks. Further, railways and central public sector undertakings also conduct many examinations every year for recruiting personnel to their organizations. And there are also tests conducted for recruiting teachers, associate professors, and others for various university systems teaching jobs. Now, many students take these examinations, and as you know, the structure, content, and the pattern of testing the candidates is very different in these various examinations. So today, what I want to do is I will only discuss a few what I call the core skills which students require for appearing in these examinations. Now, let me tell you how these, as I told you, these tests are quite different. They differ from each other, but they also have certain common features. So let me mention those common features to start with. First of all, these tests are held in 2 or 3 stages. Generally, there is a preliminary examination in which students have to qualify in order to take the main examination. And after they succeed in the main examination, they are called for interviews, and based on their performance in the interviews and in the main examinations, they are declared either successful or unsuccessful. Another feature common to all these examinations, and which is what separates them from the university examinations, is that the success rate unfortunately is quite low. This is because the number of applicants for the job is much more, far more in fact, than the available jobs. Let me give you a simple example. For example, so far as the UPSC Civil Services examination is concerned, around 4 to 5 lakh students appear for the exam. Out of them, only 15,000 to 16,000 qualify for the main exam, and out of these 15,000 to 16,000 students, 3,000 students are called for the interview, and finally about 1,000 students are selected for the jobs. So you can see that the competition is quite tough and the success rate is low. And actually, it's not too, it will not be incorrect to call these examinations actually as some kind of filtration test. So this is the other feature of these exams. Now, now friends, let me come to the common points. By common points, I mean that how should students prepare for these tests? That is one thing. And the second thing I will mention is what are the common skills tests, skill sets which are required by students. So far as I mentioned earlier, these examinations differ widely in their structure, course content, and the method of testing the students. And however, there are certain common points in them and the common sets of skills which I have mentioned. These can be classified into three categories. The first category is what I call comprehension skills. That is, when you read something, to what extent you understand it. The second skill set is of writing, that how well are you able to write answers or some descriptive passages. And the third thing, that the third skill set essentially is about mathematical and logical ability. That is, doing solving mathematical problems and certain questions related to simple elementary logic. Now, let me begin with the reading skills or comprehension skills. Many of you may feel that you have already completed your education up to the first degree level at least. Therefore, you know the process of reading, the process of understanding, and so on. But the main problem is the level of your reading skills is often not sufficient for the requirements of the UPSC and other competitive examinations. Now, what happens is, generally we tend to read materials which are very simple. For example, we read some newspaper items which describe some event, or we may read some short stories, or we may read simple accounts of the common experiences of people. Now, when you read this kind of materials, it is quite easy to understand them because they do not require a lot of any conceptual background. Any person who is able to read can understand them. But when you come to these competitive examinations, you have to address passages, or you have to read and understand passages which contain abstract and general ideas. Because these passages contain abstract and general ideas, you will find it difficult to understand them. The other problem is that very often the subject matter may be unfamiliar to you. The words or the terminology which the author uses may be unknown to you, and the sentences are also often constructed in a manner which is hard to find. They are not very simple sentences. They are constructed in a somewhat with complex logical syntax. So, first thing is that you will have to get over this problem, so that you have to simply upgrade your existing level of comprehension. So, we may ask, at this point, let me mention two other things. When I speak of comprehension, there are two meanings of this term. First term is comprehension may mean that you read a passage in a question paper and you answer the questions based on that passage. That is called comprehension. The other meaning of comprehension is you are trying to learn about some topic in a subject which is prescribed for UPSC or the state civil public services examination. And when you are reading about that topic, you also have to understand it, and therefore it also involves comprehension skills. Of course, both the comprehension skills are in a way common, but there are of course some very minor differences. So you may ask me that if it is difficult to understand, what do I do about it? So one simple answer is, as in any other activity of life, you require a lot of practice. So essentially what it means is that you should do a lot of reading. You may ask, am I not reading already? Of course you are reading, nobody denies it. But the problem is your reading is often confined only to a few topics or subjects which are prescribed in your degree level. And the other reading which you are doing, your other reading materials, they are not academic reading materials. They do not tax your mind. Therefore, your skills are not getting improved. So, how do I do it? So, this is one simple answer is that you have to read. And what do I read? What I suggest is that in these examinations, the course mainly consists of certain standard topics. For example, let us take IAS or let us take UPSC or the state civil service exams. Essentially, they deal with topics like Indian history and heritage, Indian geography and world geography, Indian economic problems, India's social problems, science and technology in India, environmental problems of world and India, major international events, and so on and so forth, and also whatever is prominent, say events like what is happening in the, say, in sports or games and so on. So basically one thing is where do you have to read about all these diverse areas, and one simple source of reading about them are actually textbooks. These are textbooks which are prepared by an organization known as National Council for Educational Research and Training. In short, it is known as NCERT. So NCERT has prepared many school textbooks covering various topics, right from English literature, sociology, history, philosophy, and so on. So you can start reading these textbooks from class 8 or 9 onwards till say class 11 or 12. So in this process, some of the topics which are dealt with, which are prescribed in UPSC or state syllabus, and which are also and from which also you get the comprehension passages, you will become familiar with them. You will be familiar with the ideas, and you will also be familiar with the terminology which the authors are using, and you will get acquainted with the background of the various current discussions on these topics. So this will greatly enhance your ability both of your learning as well as of answering the comprehension questions. So this is one approach we can do, you can follow. And here let me also mention, although I have mentioned about the NCERT, many state boards also have prepared textbooks on more or less the same subjects. So say if you are from Tamil Nadu or from Andhra Pradesh or wherever, if you want, you can read the textbooks of the relevant state board also. Now, so far friends, I told you about one aspect of reading, that you are trying to familiarize yourself with reading in diverse areas. And the second thing is, after reading any passage or say text, how do you follow it? How do you understand it? Now, here very often what happens is when we read, we do not read in a very methodical, systematic, intensive, analytical way. You see, what we do is very often we are reading somewhat casually, we are reading lazily, we are reading inactively. We do not get fully engaged with the text, so we are not trying to fully absorb the ideas contained in the text. So with the result, very often what happens is even when you read, say, about a topic, after completing the reading, you do not have very clear, specific ideas in a logical sequence in your mind. So first thing you have to do is that you have to make your reading very effective and efficient, and this you can do only by following systematic analytical reading procedures in which you try to absorb the ideas contained in a passage. Since what I have told you just now may seem a little, let us say, abstract or general, so let me try to give you a simple example which you can easily follow. Suppose, say, you are reading a passage on climate change. As you know, climate change is an important topic now in environment, right? It is being discussed. It's also known as global warming. So suppose you have read 3 pages, then the 3 pages will essentially, let us say, contain, say, about 15 paragraphs, or the 3 pages contain. Now, these 15 paragraphs will each have one main idea, which is also called the topical idea, which is the subject of that particular paragraph. Now, apart from these main ideas, which let us call them M1 to M15, right, in these 15 paragraphs, you will also have other supporting areas, sentences in each paragraph, which support or elaborate or explain the main idea, right? Suppose there are 4 or 5 such sentences. So in each paragraph, you really have to absorb what exactly is the main idea and what are the other supporting ideas. Now, by the time you reach the end of the 15 paragraph, the numbers may become too much. And if suppose I am talking about 10 pages, the numbers may seem unmanageable. Then what do? Then what you have to do is at least try to keep track of the main ideas and of a few material or important subordinate ideas. So at the end of 3 pages or at the end of let us say 15 paragraphs, you will have a hang of what you have read. So after completing those 13, say the 15 paragraphs or 3 pages, you are left with some very clear-cut ideas in your mind. Now there is another issue which I want to mention here. Suppose you are reading 15 paragraphs. Say by the time let us say you reach the 8th paragraph, you would have forgotten what is stated in the first 1, 2 or 3rd paragraph. So what do you have to do? So you have to somehow keep track of the flow of ideas. So this is also called coherence and the continuity in writing. So what you have to do is that after finishing let us say 8 or 10 or 15 paragraphs, you also try to write a few words on each paragraph. Give it a small heading in 3-4 words. So what happens is at the end of reading 15 paragraph, you will have 15 subject heading, you will have some 15 main ideas, and you will also have other important ideas. So then you can make a decision, which are the important ideas you will know. Then what is the order in which the main ideas have appeared, that you will know. And in this process, what happens, you have acquired an in-depth understanding of what you have read. Now, friends, let me also tell you one thing, that I have written a few books for those who are appearing for the competitive exams for the UPSC. So, one is Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude. I wrote it along with my colleague, who is also a retired IAS officer, P.N. Rai Chaudhary. And at this stage, I would like to draw your attention particularly to our book on Mastering Reading Skills for Civil Services Examination. So this is a book which we have written keeping in view especially the requirements of the Indian students who are appearing for UPSC and the state competitive examinations. So now, I have tried to take the views or opinions of great writers, authors and educational thinkers, and I have adapted it for the requirements of the Indian student. So I request you to have a look at this book of ours. I will not mention the other books just now. In this context of comprehension, let me mention also another important point which you have to keep in mind while reading. As I told you that you should know what are the main ideas of the paragraphs, right? And I also told you that you should follow the entire sequence of the argument or the sequence of the narrative, or in the olden times it was called a train of thought. Normally when you are reading, you do not deal with a single idea. There is a collection of ideas. So you have to be aware of what is the arrangement of this collection of ideas. How are they grouped? That is one issue. How are the grouped ideas arranged in a sequence? That is the second issue. So this is essentially called the organization of whatever you read. So basically this means that you are looking at the ideas and you are absorbing the ideas from what you have read, and you are also looking at the organization of the ideas, how they are put together, how the writer has put together. So this is actually what I meant by analytical reading, and this is what you have to do. Incidentally, this is what you have to do not only for your UPSC or state examination, but also for your university examination also. Now let me draw your attention to another aspect also which you should keep in view while reading. So now when you have read a paragraph, now in the paragraph also are arranged in certain way, and the authors try to do or accomplish different objectives in writing a paragraph. Say, for example, sometimes they are just giving a definition. Say, they may define what is momentum, what is impulse, or what is a repo rate. This is one way of writing a paragraph. The other way of writing a paragraph is they may try to explain a concept. Say, for example, they may try to explain to you what is gender equity, or they may try to explain to you what is federalism, or they may try to explain to you what is a fundamental right. So these are all concepts. Or they may be trying to explain to you about some doctrines, or say, for example, what is a doctrine? Suppose a socialistic pattern of society, that is a doctrine. Say free market economy, you can call it also that some kind of doctrine. Or capitalist theory, that is a doctrine. So is it about that? Normally doctrines, are covered in various mini paragraphs. Normally you can't compress them into one single paragraph. Another thing which happens in a paragraph is that the author is simply elaborating an idea. Suppose he is discussing what is anxiety neurosis, right? Then he will describe, he will write some 6 or 7 sentences and explain the features or attributes of anxiety neurosis. Now, there are also other things which happen in a paragraph. Sometimes authors compare and contrast. They means what are the similarities and dissimilarities between two things. So I will give you a simple example. Suppose say the approach of Nehru towards socialism and the approach of Gandhi ji towards socialism. So now somebody these two approaches are different. Gandhi thought differently about socialism, Nehru thought differently about socialism. So the author may try to tell you in what ways they differ, right? And sometimes the author may simply give you an example. So, and at times they may also describe a process. For example, from your science classes, how is sulfuric acid produced? How is oxygen produced? How do you find the square root of, say, a number 2,59,336, I say. What are the steps? So steps, sequences, processes could be another way in which a paragraph describes. So essentially, friends, what you have to do is that you are looking at whatever topic you are reading, you are making an analytical reading, you are trying to look at the ideas, you are trying to look at their organization or arrangement, you are looking at particularly how when a topic is discussed, the logical sequence in which the ideas appear, and you are also looking at what an author is doing in a particular paragraph. Suppose you do all these things. Now actually it promotes your understanding, it promotes your insight, and this is actually what is called a self-learning. Believe me, if you follow this methodology, you don't require a teacher. It does not mean, I am not advocating that you please don't attend classes. What I mean is that whatever the teacher is teaching, you will derive much more value if you do this kind of analysis on your own at the beginning. Now coming to the UPSC examinations or the state civil services examination, this method is very important because you are reading new subjects with which you are not familiar. So you have to do a lot of self-learning. Secondly, even if you look at other books available in the market, or if you attend some coaching classes or training classes, even then they will not be able to cover the whole syllabus, they will not be able to discuss everything. So it is always necessary for you to do a lot of lifting on your own. That means you have to do a lot of reading on your own. And I am fond of saying, I use the common phrase, it should be self-motivated, self-directed, self-learning. That is what you have to aim at when you are appearing for this exam. So, friends, I will leave this aspect here. So basically I told you what are reading skills. I put it in a very simple way. So if you want, I will again mention the book which I have written, Mastering Reading Skills for Civil Services Examination. Please go through it for understanding this whole thing in greater detail. It contains a lot of exercises also which you can do along with answers. Now, let me go to the other part of the skill sets. That is what I call the writing skills. So, in most of the exams, the first preliminary part of the examination is based on objective question. So, you have to select one answer. So, you do not have to write anything. But in the second part of the examination, which is the main examination, it involves writing actually. It may be an essay, it may be an answer, of 400 words, 300 words, 150 words, 200 words, whatever it is. So, essentially you are writing actually. So, when you are writing, what is the most important requirement? When you are writing, the answer should be effective. What do I mean by saying that the answer should be effective? First of all, you should be able to express your thought clearly. Whatever is in your mind, that idea should be correctly embodied in words, right? That's one thing. In other words, that means you are writing a sentence. Now, the other requirement is, naturally in an examination, this sentence has to be grammatical. It should not have any grammatical errors. It should be properly constructed according to accepted syntactical rules, right? Then the other issue is, when writing the answers, one part of writing is you may write only a few individual sentences, but then you go to longer answers also. Sometimes you may have to write 150 words. So, this means here you are writing not only single sentence, but many sentences. So, when you come to writing many sentences, two things become important. One is that the individual sentences, as I told you, should be grammatically correct. There should be no spelling mistakes. That is one part of it. And the sentences should be written in a simple, straightforward, direct manner. It should not be indirect, complicated, or messy. This you will learn. I will tell you how you can learn about these things, because this is essentially about learning grammar and writing. Then, apart from these single sentences, the answers they will be like short paragraphs. So, when you are writing a paragraph, as I told you earlier already, those 5 or 6 ideas which constitute your answer, they should have a structure, they should be properly organized, right? So, that means you have to arrange them in a logical order, so that each sentence should follow the other in a logical way, right? And if suppose your answer consists of 4 or 5 paragraphs, let us say, then each paragraph should have one main idea, it should have some related supporting ideas or supporting sentences. So, main idea, supporting sentences, next para, main idea, supporting sentence, everything arranged in a logical sequence. So, you have to practice this actually. Now, if you practice this, then you will be able to write effective answers, and you have to write the answers which are exactly matching the question. Suppose the question is about, let us say, the distinction between fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy. I am giving you a topic from Constitution of India. Now, you should not simply write about fundamental rights and simply write about directive principles of state policy. You have to explain in what way they are different. Otherwise, you are not answering the question. And if the question is, and each question has what is called a thrust, or it has a center point. So, your answer should be match the center point of the question. So, there should be consistency between your answer and the intention of the question. So, this is the second thing. So, friends, basically now I have covered both about reading skills, writing skills. Of course, what I said about writing skills is very, very shallow, simple things I told you, because many volumes have been written on how to write English or how to write prose and all that. I will not go into that. It is sufficient if you write simple grammatical sentences and you observe the logical order in passages and answers you are writing. Now, let me make a few other observations also. Now, how do I improve my reading and writing skills, right? I have already told you, you try to read the textbooks of the NCERT and of the State Education Board. Now, over and above this, what I suggest is, I'll give you the examples from English writing. So you have to read what are called classics. Classics means books which are written by great writers and which have stood the test of time. For example, the dramas written in English by Shakespeare, they are classics because although they are written some 500 years ago or so, still people are reading. What Kalidasa wrote, Shakuntala is a classic. Similarly, Hamlet written by Shakespeare is a classic. Macbeth is a classic. As You Like It is a classic, and so on. Now, how do you read the classics? You cannot directly read the classics. You will have to read the short versions or simplified versions of classics. So let me give you a few examples, because so far I have mentioned only the dramatist, English dramatist Shakespeare. So you can find many interesting reading materials, which will both improve your language and they will also be a source of great entertainment. Let me give you a few examples. There are stories written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. They are all, they feature the character Sherlock Holmes. There are maybe 100, 200 of such stories. You can read those stories. They will have both, it will improve your knowledge and it will also improve your language writing, your comprehension, and you will also be entertained also. You can also read the stories written by Tolstoy. Of course, Tolstoy is a very great writer. He's a Russian writer, but those materials are, translations are available, you can read. Let me mention a few other writers, novelists. For example, you have Sir Walter Scott, you have, let us say, Oliver Goldsmith, you have Charles Dickens, you have Jane Austen, you have George Eliot, and so many others are there, So you may not be able to read. For example, you want to read a novel, let us say by R.L. Stevenson, Treasure Island, which is a very famous novel. You also must have heard of the novel Silas Marner by George Eliot, another famous novel. You also might have read about Pride and Prejudice, another famous novel by, this time by Jane Austen. How do you read it? I mean, it requires certain standard of English knowledge to be able to read them. But fortunately, many of these novels have been simplified. So to begin with, you can start reading these simplified versions of these novels. And when you read these novels, in the initial stages at least, don't worry too much if you don't understand much. Main thing is, you go on reading. As you go on reading, you will find with passage of time that you are able to understand them better. And automatically, this will also improve your style of, English writing, your understanding and so on. Of course, some of you may say that I do not have time. Of course, it all depends on at what stage you are at present, But even if you are saying the first year degree, say BA, second year, third year, this you can treat it as a time for preparation. Instead of reading what I call, trashy novels, you should read only these things. And I will also advise you to read novels by, for example, Agatha Christie you can read, because they are well written novels, good English, and they are again entertaining stuff. Now, so far I have dealt with two things. One is I told you how to improve your reading. Secondly, I told you how to improve your writing. And some of you may feel that I have made it difficult and I have not given you any shortcuts. Nowadays we come across this expression very often. They say, don't work hard, work smart. It is true in certain conditions. This is particularly true in case of applications of software. Where the software, what the Americans are trying to do, they try to make the software as user-friendly as possible. So in the process, everything is made simple. So when they say smart, it means it's extremely user-friendly. It doesn't involve any effort on the users part. But in an educational context, you cannot follow this method. Sometimes, you have to work hard. For example, if you want to learn mathematics, it's very difficult to learn it in any way other than by uh, solving lot of problems, learning lot of theorems, and acquiring lot of background knowledge, right? So now, basically what I suggest is please be wary. Don't fall for shortcuts or what they call the primrose paths. So try to work hard methodically. Every day you should work. And the last part I will come to now is what I call the mathematical reasoning. Really speaking, I am not competent to speak on this subject because I am not a mathematician. But since we are talking only about the class 10 level of mathematics, I will give you one or two hints. In most of these examinations, they test you only in your mathematical proficiency only up to class 10. You don't have to go beyond class 10. So here also, the topics they use are, for example, say time and distance, percentages, fractions, say then permutations, combinations, probability, and so on. I won't repeat the list. So here, what should be your technique? The technique and method consists of this. You see, in mathematics, in any topic, there are a given types of problems. Suppose say you take permutations. There may be 15 types of problems which can come. That means each problem has a different way of solving. Similarly, it may be in combinations and probability. Suppose within these three interrelated topics, there may be 50 type of problems. Then how do you master them? So you have to master all the 50 types. Under each type, you try to do as many examples as you can. Then make sure that you understand the procedure. It is called algorithm. A procedure for solving any mathematical problem is known as, we can call it algorithm or solution method. You should know the solution method. Once you know the solution method, and you know the type of problems, you will be able to answer any question. So now, friends, basically I have completed whatever I wanted to say. Essentially, the reading skill, then the writing skills, and also how to acquire a minimum of proficiency in mathematics, and how do you approach those problems from the point of view of UPSC or GPSC exam. Now finally, let me wind up with a few more words, that when you appear for these exams, you must have a clear strategy. Basically what you have to do essentially is you should know what is the syllabus of different subjects. Syllabus, that means what are the topics which you have to learn, right? Now, all the topics which you have to learn will be found in the books, or otherwise you can go to the UPSC notification and see what they are. Now, please try to master all those topics thoroughly, right? That is what you have to do. And here what you have to do, one very crude method which I recommend is, suppose you have to read, say, let us say, it's a very hypothetical example, 10 books you have to read. Let us say 10 books means, let us also say you have to read some 3,000 pages or 4,000 pages. Then you say you have about 150 days or 200 days. Now you can, and let us say you work for about 5 hours a day. So that means you will have on the one side maybe some 1,500 hours or 2,000 words, and you may also have, let us say, 3,000 pages. You know how much work you have to do per hour. And please reduce the work you have to do in terms of numbers. So many pages, so many problems. In this form you have to put it. Very often what students do, today I will read history, tomorrow I will read environment. That's not the correct way of putting a target. So put the target like this, that today I will read about biodiversity. I will read, let us say, 50 pages or 100 pages, 60 pages. I will read for 6 hours. In each hour, I will complete 10 pages. So then what happens? You have a timetable or the measurable target. Suppose it's like a driver, going on a journey. He knows I have to drive 250 kilometers today. So similarly, you will also have to arrange your program so that you have a clear-cut timetable before you. This is what the other thing you have to do is, every day you please set apart some hours for reading. If you are also studying for the degree course, you have to divide the time, set apart some time, and during those time, please don't read anything else, don't concentrate on any other matter. And finally, friends, let me also tell you that you see, nowadays we are subject to various what I call the distractions. The distractions are those activities which are basically unproductive, or which may lead to some kind of temporary enjoyment, but in the process, they will waste our time. I mean, suppose if you are a student and you have limited time, so those limited time should be devoted not for watching TV, not for doing that spending time on apps, not on mobile, not on tablets, and so on. So you have to minimize those activities and devote all your time for studies, and for those studies and readings which improve your reading skills and your writing skills. So I don't want to take more of your time, and whatever I have told you is a very general approach, but I think I have covered most of the items which are really necessary for those who want to appear or prepare seriously and sincerely for the competitive exams. Thank you.